Welcome, everyone. I'm John Ryan for the Predictive Playbook Sports Betting Show. We apologize. It was my mistake on the technological side of things today that we are starting late, but my apologies. But nevertheless, we're going to get right to it here with my co-host and good pal, Rudy Reyes. Rudy, how are you doing today?
I am doing good. I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm busy. I got a lot of stuff going on today, this weekend. Um, just busy. And the NFL season actually keeps everybody busier than you'd
Sure
probably
does.
think, especially on the boarding, on the betting line. Excuse me. Of course, that's always on the border. Whether you want to do any type of gambling, or if you can afford to lose, play. If you can't, then don't.
So true. It's the best advice in the world. I know human nature, it's very hard to fulfill that sometimes for some of us, but we're here to help, and if you ever have a problem, the number to call, gambling, the hotline for addiction and that kind of behavioral can be helped.
It can
It's a,
call
it's a
one eight
very
hundred.
powerful thing.
Yeah, 1-800-GAMBLER is the best way to get some kind of control
Yeah.
over that gambling, issue, I'll say.
Yeah, no, like I always say, Rudy, if you made a bet and you start sweating or you feel your heart rate go up a whole bit more than normal, and you're thinking like, oh my God, what if I can't afford the mortgage or the rent next month when I lose this? Then you bet too much.
That's right. Don't bet the farm when all you have is a cow.
That's true. Yeah, you can't keep the cow outdoors safely. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that one. And they don't change their spots, just like leopards. Speaking of leopards, we had a couple teams last night. John, if I could provide the segue
Sure. Go
on
ahead.
Thursday football. I do like the NFL Prime version on Amazon. I really appreciate what they do there. I know they have an all-star cast of characters with Andrew Whitworth, as well as Tony Gonzalez, um, Ryan Fitzpatrick, not to be confused with Minka Fitzpatrick, very different guys by every sense of the word. Clarissa Thompson certainly likes to break news and create accurate reports, and she believes that false reports are one of the worst narratives you can have in sports in general, especially on TV. However, last night's game was an absolute, I don't know, it was really riddled with a lot of injuries. You've seen Lamar Jackson go down, but then come back into the game. You've seen Joe Burrow go down. He did not enter that second half of the game last night against Baltimore in Baltimore. Ravens had their hands full early in last night's game against Cincinnati. Lamar passed 4,000 career rushing yards, which is certainly something to look forward to as he continues throughout the rest of his season. Having the pleasure of interviewing him when he was drafted certainly was a chip on his shoulder. He currently still plays with in the NFL. So, there's just a lot in that game, a lot to dissect in regards to what that game looks like. If you did not watch it, but if you did, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I can go through all the play-by-play stuff. But at the end of the day, it was a riddled game with nothing but injuries associated with the totality of what these both teams were actually facing. Loose gravel on the ground underneath the fake grass. A lot of reasons why Lamar Jackson couldn't make the cuts that he normally does when running the football. But at the end of the day, this was really about the tail of the tape of what this matchup was like in Baltimore. And of course, with Joe Burrow going down, Lamar Jackson with an ankle injury, Ravens find themselves atop of the AFC North at 8-3 by winning 34-20, and then the Bengals dropping to 5-5 on the season, which I don't believe anybody's seen coming. I thought that most people headed into the season would have seen Cincinnati finding a way to basically have the reverse being true at 8-3 versus where they're at 5-5. And of course, the Steelers are still in second place in that division and take on a very hungry Watson-less quarterback under center, as they're going to start a rookie under center this weekend. This is going to be interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, to say the least, that is for sure. It's fast becoming, well, not even fast becoming, it already has been a league of attrition. And if you look at the Super Bowl participants in recent years, they are the best, and sometimes the best because they're the healthiest, and they avoid these injury bugs somehow. But this year seems like you said it just seems to be a mash unit across the NFL of these injuries, and it almost angers me when I see it caused by poor field conditions, like you mentioned.
Yeah,
MetLife Field needs to get their act together and put down grass. And after all, MetLife puts down grass because the European soccer teams refuse to play on fake grass. They will not play on it. So the MetLife goes in there and puts grass down for them, but they don't do it for their own NFL league, which I'm sure provides a lot more money. Maybe it's mind blowing. And then to
yeah,
see the stars get hurt is just it just stinks.
yeah. No, it does. You've seen starters inserted in certain positions where they otherwise would not have been, inserted into. Granted, the field conditions were a little bit better. There are stadiums like Pittsburgh that hosts a college team. Granted, the field, and with that, the understanding of, well, we're going to just kind of resod the grass, put some water on it, and then let the Steelers come play the very next day. Fortunately enough for them, that didn't happen this time around because the Steelers are away this week, traveling to Cleveland. But Pitt tore up the field last night in a very topsy-turvy game at home. So I think that when you look at guys under center, I think those are the ones, those specific players are the ones I believe are being more replaced on a regular basis because of the amount of footwork they do in a very short box, a short frame, if you will. We've seen Lamar go down, trying to make cuts and turns and stops and things of that nature. He just assumed naturally just lay down on the
Yep, I
grass.
agree.
He didn't want any further injuries. So I don't blame him for that.
Yeah, it's similar. Like it almost reminds me in boxing where a guy has had enough and then he just takes the knee and so it doesn't get any worse.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't want to be a Rocky Balboa out there, getting hit in the head, consistently, and all of a sudden you're wondering, is this guy going to get enough head contusions or receive enough head contusions rather that would disable him, playing any further.
Yep. I'm going to just run a little query here on primetime totals because, as we know, they were clocking at about 80% to the under. And last night we had one that played over, and I was fortunate enough to be on the over. But the reason I bring it up, Rudy, is not to gloat on a win. It's that don't think for a second that because unders have dominated in such a historic fashion that the over now becomes the automatic bet. It's similar to like Apple stock getting a correction and going down, and then you invest into it expecting a bounce back. But
Right.
the bounce back in sports betting is not the same, and the over may go 50% the rest of the season. And you just can't expect any trend to completely reverse 100%. And a lot of people have asked me about that. Like, should I go out and bet the over on every single game? Well, no, don't do that. It's still game by game analysis to determine what your bet's going to be. Sure, the recency bias and the trend is important to know, but never make a bet just to go opposite of a trend just for the sake that you think it's going to bounce back. That's all I have to say on that one.
No, you're absolutely right, and I believe there was a parlay that somebody had played and won. I think 500, like $500,000 or some astronomical number like that, all because he played a low parlay. It wasn't money that was put right back into what he was betting. He just decided, hey, let me just throw it out there and see what happens, and he walked away with the sizable amount of money. I won't like that much. I wouldn't have to work for a while with that kind of bread.
I agree.
But moving into NCAA, there's a lot of games this weekend, John. I know you wanted to segue into that, but there's a lot of great overs in college football, at least based on what I was looking at earlier. You've seen the huge over with Washington barely escaping travesty by like inches, if you will, or maybe touchdowns rather. Oregon State travels to play Washington. They've kind of skated a little bit on the thin ice side when it comes to margin of victories. But I think Washington handles the over there. But I want to go kind of in a game by game, if you will, if you don't mind. I
No,
like
no,
to
no. Go ahead. I'm just pulling the games up on the database here just to be able to follow along. But yeah, it's all
sure.
good.
Yeah, no. Washington is trying to keep its CFP, if anybody doesn't know what that is, college football playoffs, alive, trying to find themselves in a top position for Pac-12 conference championship game conversations as they hit the road to face Oregon. Oddly enough, the Beavers are kind of skating thin as well when you look at what that transpires into heading into a play-in tournament against rival Oregon. So it could boil down to Washington and Oregon. If there was an under or over, I would probably take Washington on the under. I would take Oregon on the over, but slightly. I don't know that Oregon can I don't know can do much more than that with all the margins of victories. Also, very similarly to Washington within the Pac-12, and then going on to where Kansas hosts Kansas State. Of course, is a battle of the K-State in the Sunflower Showdown, as they call it, because we know sunflowers grow dramatically there in the state of Kansas. If nothing else, you have sunflowers in the state of Kansas. So the Wildcats still have a possibility, or on the outside looking in right now on a Big 12 championship conversation, but they're going to have to win out, and the Texas would have to lose at least one game, and I just don't know if I see that happening. Texas has been playing extremely well despite the shocker loss this season, and I think Kansas would love absolutely nothing more to see Texas go down. What are your thoughts on this specific game? I understand that there could be an underplay on this specific game. Who do you take as the under and the over, and who wins?
And you're looking at the Texas game, right?
No, Kansas hosts Kansas State.
Oh, Kansas K-State, right. So Kansas, to your point, has been playing extraordinarily well again this year, and it is kind of nice to see that they're no longer the doormat of the Big 12. They obviously have a tremendous basketball program, legendary all by itself. But when you have a school program now adding more and more sports at different, even the sports that we don't see on TV all the time are doing much, much better. It's just a fun thing to see. In this game, though, I think I lean a little bit on the over on this one, simply because these games in the Big 12, it just seems like they get off to maybe a little bit slow start, and then all of a sudden it's up and down the field, and the defenses are on the field far too long. The offenses score so quick that they put their own defense in trouble because they're going back out in the field again after a quick score. Even pick sixes are great plays, but the defense is right back out there again. And in these situations, it can get like a pinball machine. But in this particular game, let me just pull up the data on it. Rudy, if you give me just 1 second
No,
here.
it's not a problem. I think there's value in this specific game because you have crosstown rivals that have been at it for quite some time, and this is not the first time we've seen crosstown division rivals facing off with a lot of zest and fervor and what they play and what they actually bring in those respective matchups. I mean, we 3-2 in last week's value play column. Okay, maybe so, or maybe they're going to have to bring their record to the last three installments to maybe 11 and 4. But respectfully, I think Kansas takes the under on this one against Kansas State, maybe an upset pick, if you will. I don't know if the upset pick has to do with the betting pick, but if there was a parlay and both teams, are going to go at it, it's going to be a close one. I would probably take Kansas State for the parlay, but I don't know. Since I'm not extremely informed and you're the betting guru, I'll probably take the parlay if there is one offered for Kansas State. So maybe I could pick up some, some pizza money, as you say. Hold the anchovies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the betting line 57.5 implies, I'm looking at the board right now, basically a 28.5, probably 29.5 team total for K-State. Actually, I stand corrected because that's just taking the total divided by 2. K-State's favored by 9.5, so it's basically adding 5 more to the total. So they're projected to score 33 points, Kansas 24, and that's what the market is telling us for a final score. So if you could find a 32.5 on K-State and you like them to score a lot of points, then that's the number I would look for to do that. K-State is, as much as I mentioned Kansas playing extraordinarily well, when these teams in the Big 12, the Big 10, SEC, Pac-12, ACC score 28 or more points, and they're actually projected by the market to score 28 or more points, they don't always do that, but when they do, they go against the spread at a very high level. It's starting at least 60%, and some of these teams are, in the high 70s. So in situations, I mean, I can just type this in real quick. Let's say points greater than 31, and let's say playing on the road against a conference foe, and we'll do the last 5 seasons.
That's a good span. That's a very good span. I think there's a lot of value within that 5-year span, and the margin of victory, if you will, for either one of these teams. It's not as if they're not familiar with one another. They play each other once a year, so being able to plan for them may be a little bit different depending on the play calls, the play styles, the play types. Which ones do they play? Is it a 3rd and short? Or are they just trying to move the chains? Is it a 3rd and maybe some trickery on that to get the first down? I think both of these teams may have at least one trick play underneath their sleeves as they face off Saturday.
I definitely agree. And K-State went on the road against a conference foe and scores 31 or more points. They're a perfect 8-0 against the spread, 7-1 straight up. So there you go. Live in-game betting too. If they say they score 24 in the first half, the laws of probability clearly suggest that they're going to score more than 31 if they come out of the gate that hot. So then say the game is only 24-21, K-State at the half, you're probably going to get a pretty darn good betting line on K-State, a little bit cheaper than what you're seeing at 9.5. So with games that have these high totals and a conference rivalry where they kind of know each other pretty well, you can expect lead changes. And you got to take those lead changes, in my opinion. This is how I bet it. If I'm on K-State and Kansas scores first, I add pizza money to my original bet. If K-State scores first, then there's nothing to do. But then if Kansas retakes the lead at some point during the first half, then that's another opportunity for, pepperoni and cheese type of pizza bet. And that makes it fun because you're zigging and zagging, and it becomes, in the beginning, it might be tough for you to, get the feel for doing it because you're going contrarian to what just happened in front of your eyes. But believe me, the lead changes are immense, especially in the NFL this past year. It's just such a great opportunity to take $10 and have some fun with it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It's the opponents who allow 31 or more points against a conference foe, and we're looking at Kansas now. I'm sure this record's not so good. 4-30 straight up is Kansas when they've allowed 31 or more points in a conference matchup. 11-21 with 2 pushes for 34% against the spread. So again, you start seeing this unfold before your eyes. The history tells you probably what the result is going to be.
Wow.
I would say if Kansas gives up 24 in the first half, that the bet would be clearly to take Kansas State at some line less than the pre-flop betting line. So anything less than 9.5 at halftime, I think would be an excellent bet if Kansas State has that many points on the board in the first half.
Yeah, no, it certainly can provide a solid segue for both of these teams heading into a very familiar situation. Of course, I'm more than confident to suggest not only does Kansas State or Kansas wish for Texas to be out, but I think that could be more of a likelihood than anything else. I don't think either one of these teams want to play Texas in a championship format, only because Texas is very hot right now. And if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I was, and Texas was facing off against either one of these teams, I'm picking Texas on the under. But if for some reason they're on the over, I'll take them there as well. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'm going to give you one of my best bets for the week, Rudy. I'm pulling up DraftKings because then I'm going to have a question for you um, at the end of this little slide presentation here with the betting system of who you think is going to be in the Final Four and maybe who you think is going to win the national championship, because we currently have two teams that have to play each other next week in the top four, and the loser is not going to be in the top four anymore. So that opens up the door for somebody to get in. But let's do first things first here with this little slide. And this is a bet on Arizona State. And this is one that grades as an 8 unit on a 5 to 10 unit pick. So if you're a client, you're going to get a report that shows this, maybe not in a nice graphical format like it is right now, but it gives you the text of what the system is. And it supports the predictive models and what they're saying for the game, much like we just did with the if-then type of analysis with K-State. If K-State scores 31, here's how they do. So in this case, Arizona State, we're going to bet on double-digit home underdogs. The total is 55 or fewer points. The dogs are allowing an average of 325 to 375 yards per game, which is not good. The favorite is coming off of a game in which they allowed 6.3 or more yards per play. That is actually pretty bad for a team coming off of a win. The favorite is an elite offense gaining an average of 420 or more yards per game. As you can see, 23-10 against the number for 70% winning tickets since 2006 with these double-digit dogs. And if our double-digit dog just happens to be at home, 6-1 against the number, and they win outright 4 out of 7 times. So this is a big 23.5 point underdog. And believe me, I've been on dogs in the past. Not gloating, not bragging. It's just fact. And for whatever reason, out of the blue, something like this can happen. I'm certainly not forecasting or predicting that Arizona State is going to, whoop on Oregon this upcoming week, because Oregon has a lot on the line, and they are a very good team. But every once in a while, there's games like a few years ago where LSU went into the swamp as a 24.5 point underdog and defeated Florida. And, nobody at the time would think, well, that's not possible. LSU stinks this year. They're not going to beat Florida in the swamp. Same thing here. Is Oregon going to lose to Arizona State? There's not a chance in the world, Rudy, that they're going to lose, right? I'm telling you that there's a smidge of a chance that they will. But more importantly, the bet is to take the 23.5 points. And if the money line is available, sprinkle it with just a little $10 pizza money bet and just sit back and see what happens.
Yeah, I can't take Arizona State at all. And I can't even take them seriously, to be honest with you, because they have lost so many games and some of them haven't even been close to winnable, while others are just blowout, type of formats. I just don't look. Oregon has been playing extremely well.
Yes, they have.
They have scored on almost every possession. Their defense is playing with a level of ferocity that I haven't seen from a Michigan team in quite some time. And I know people are out on the QB thinking, well, this is just him showing up when he feels he needs to. And yes, that's true, but when you have to is different than when you need to. When you have to win in the last seconds of a game is a little bit different. I think, Bo Nix is I think he's been one of the most welcomed surprises in the NCAA landscape from a quarterback perspective, because he's playing like an NFL style quarterback. Now, I'm not suggesting that he's the next coming of Tom Brady or Joe Montana or, anyone else for that matter. But what I am suggesting is that he has the propensity to be probably one of the higher draft picks would not surprise me to see him go late in the first round to somebody who not that they're desperate for a quarterback, but wants a system quarterback plus what he brings to the table on every single snap. So from a betting perspective, all my money, even parlays, if that's even existent, would go all over Oregon, plastered on every single locker room door within the facility, including the students' doors as well. Oregon all day on this.
Very good. Now, before I let you go, I have the odds here for the college football playoffs to make them. As I think you have a lot of scenarios here out there in the West, spent the Pac-12, Washington against Oregon for the championship. What if Washington wins and only has one loss? I don't think they get in. If Oregon wins, I think they do get in. But Texas right now to get in is plus 230. To not get in is minus 290. So the market is telling us that no matter what Texas does, they may not get in. But I like Texas.
Win out. I like Texas too. I think Texas ends up winning out, and they're going to be the ones that they're going to be on the cusp, but they have to win out, and their margin of victories can't be anything less than 21 points.
Especially in the championship game. I agree 100%.
Especially
Oregon, by comparison, is minus 165 money to get in, plus 135 that they don't. So, that comes to mind here to watch this line, because if you think Washington's going to face them in the championship game, the money line that Oregon does not get in at plus 135 might be a better bet once we see what that line is with Washington and Oregon. So always use that too as an extra piece of information and get the best price you possibly can. Washington to get in is plus 140, minus 175. So it's almost a mirror image of what Oregon is.
Right. And that's where Washington can really separate themselves, especially if they win this weekend, and much less win out. I mean, clearly, even though their strength of schedule, which should always be taken into consideration, whether or not you enter a championship game or not, if your margin of victory, and it has to be a convincing one, despite strength of schedule. So if they're going to go in and shoot out or make it a shootout, probably not going to be extremely high. If they go in and just pure flat out dominate at 35 plus points, as well as winning out their remainder schedule against teams that are above 500, either well above 500 or maybe a worst case scenario at 500, will find themselves in more of a championship conversation. Now, Pac-12 for Washington, as far as the championship goes, absolutely. I think they are the creme of the creme. USC is kind of trailing off, especially in that loss last Saturday. Caleb Williams played some of his better balls, maybe some of his best ball in the latter parts of that game. I don't know. I think USC's on the out. They're not looking at the end. UCLA also on the out, not looking in because of strength of schedule, as well as what their winnable games were like in the margin of victory in those, as well as losses. And I think losses from a margin of victory needs to be taken into serious consideration moving forward. And I think that should play out along the NCAA landscape. And I can go on at least an hour in regards to that. I wanted to touch on one more thing before I have to get out of here. Is that 3-game suspension by the NCAA, and me, you, and Barry had spoken about that at a length. I think it's believable to suggest that was the right call. But at the same token, it was a slap on the wrist for the university. I think university is going to still benefit from that. Yeah, he's not going to be there to play, to coach up those guys heading into play Ohio State, or even on the further road games, or even a home game. But when it's all said and done, the NCAA really needs to get involved in this. I know they've been on the out looking at this and not really diving into it to become more involved in regards to the types of situations such as this, and maybe finding a way to either lay a bigger hand smack onto those repeat offenders, because we know every single year that Michigan has some type of issue. It's a recruiting issue, or it's this scandal or that scandal. They're starting to turn into the 2000 Patriots in regards to Deflategate and Watergate, or maybe not Watergate, but there's some type of gate involved with Michigan. So I think it was the right call, at least for now. And with that, anybody who likes to check out the news and listen to the news, you can download the iHeart Radio app. You can tune in to Ventura, California. We'll all be on all day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Everything going on in LA as well will be covered on that station. And then this weekend, there are a couple of games where I'll be in Los Angeles at the Sirius XM LA location. And I'll be running the boards on that, paying close attention to those games on a word-by-word basis. And yeah, find me on the RudeDogShow.com. Follow me at RudeDog Reyes on Twitter. I know it's a mouthful. Good grief. And you can find me anywhere else that social media is available to you, on every handheld device, or maybe those that get too hot on the bottom, like a laptop. Well, you can find me there as well.
Awesome stuff, Rudy. Appreciate it very much. And my final thought is to bet Florida State to win it all. I like them quite a bit right now. They're under the radar. And, you know, Georgia has a little game against Tennessee this week, too. And that's one of those 20-point underdog things that I mentioned about possible upsets. So just throwing it out there for thought. But anyway, thanks a lot, Rudy. And we'll be back again next Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with ourselves and hopefully a couple other guests that I have lined up. And we're just going to have a lot of fun. So always remember, bet with your head, not over it. And may all the wins be yours.